Today on Mr. Media, I'll talk to Jeff Keane, cartoonist of the long-running daily comic panel Family Circus, which his dad, Bill, created back in 1960. Stick around. In addition to talking about Family Circus, we're going to discuss this week's tribute by nearly 100 of the nation's cartoonists to the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience of men and women who will be pausing for a moment of silence every time my guest answers a question in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. We all know where we were when the attacks of 9/11 took place. I was here at my desk, working on a new book, The Today Show playing in the background. I stopped what I was doing for days. The President of the United States, of course, was reading a book about a goat to elementary school students about an hour south of me in Sarasota, Florida. An aide whispered the news in his ear, a quizzical expression came over his face, and he returned to finish reading the book. It seemed like we would never laugh again, except about that goat story. WTF? It fell to the professional funny men and women among us to reestablish the nation's funny bone. Late-night talk show host David Letterman is often credited with deciding it was time to go back to work and tell jokes. But truly, morning radio's Howard Stern worked through the event, calming nerves as the towers were coming down in New York City and returning to work on September 12th and every day after that. And thanks to their habit of working weeks ahead, America's daily cartoonists never missed a beat. Their gags still appeared in most newspapers, and eventually they began peppering their work with respectful references to the tragedy at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Now, on the 10th anniversary of the event universally recalled as 9/11, nearly 100 comic strip creators are joining forces this Sunday to pay tribute to a day that has become as painful in modern American history as Pearl Harbor Day was for the World War II generation. Cartoonists Remember 9/11 will bring together cartoonists and the many syndicates that distribute their work this Sunday, September 11th, 2011, for a common purpose. Joining me today to preview the Cartoonist Salute is Jeff Keane. Jeff is now in charge of creating Family Circus, the cartoon his father Bill started in 1960. He still seeks out his father's invaluable guidance and advice, which is key to keeping the feature a favorite for readers of all ages. And he's been deeply involved in helping to organize the Cartoonists Remember 9/11 event and keeping Pearl's Before Swine cartoonist Stephan Pastis in line. Jeff Keane, welcome to Mr. Media.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
I'm good. Should I say Jeffy?
Yeah. Oh, well, sorry about that. That's how I stay in character. I'm drawing.
Oh, man. All right. Now, thanks for setting the tone.
Yeah, well, you said it's time we can laugh at some things, so that's what it was.
Oh, man, that was great. No one's done that before. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, I hope not.
Jeez. Yeah, that would
I'm
be
the only one who can do that.
I don't know. Next thing you know, Pastis will want to wear a mask next time he's back on the show. It's hard to go from that to this question, but I'll try.
Okay.
Jeff, how do you remember that day a decade ago, 9/11? Where were you when you found out? What was going on in your life?
Well, believe it or not, I was out of the country. It was a very unbelievable event that happened. I was actually with Steve McGarry, who was the president of the NCS at the time, and we were doing a site visit for the next Rubin Awards in Mexico. And when we were there, we heard all about it. Well, we ended up being stuck out of the country, and we couldn't get back. Eventually, we flew to Tijuana and walked across the border about 5 days later.
Wow.
And in fact, it was one time when my wife and we had 3 little kids at the time, and she also had traveled. Her grandmother had passed away, and she was out, and so our kids were at home alone with a babysitter. And it was one of those events that you went, oh my gosh, she can't travel, because she's in Washington. I'm out of the country. Our kids there. How are we going to get them? But in the end, our travails and troubles were far less than a lot of people. It could have been a lot. It could have been a lot worse for us.
And yet, that's one of the things we forget about that week is, well, we were all mourning the dead and in fear because we didn't know what was going to happen day to day. It was I remember it was hard to sleep at night. It was weird walking the streets and not hearing airplanes overhead. There was very little traffic. But we also forget that so many people like yourself were basically stuck. I'm locked out of the country because the transportation shut down.
You would never think that. Well, okay, I guess it's always possible I could get stuck in Mexico, but the fact that Melinda would be stuck in Washington State is unfathomable. That the only way she could get was to drive back home. It was a very, very odd time for all of us to sit and spend so much time watching TV but the world continued on, and so that was what was important for all of us.
I've got maybe a strange question for you. Do you recall what ran in Family Circus on the original 9/11?
I don't recall it. It was a very innocuous cartoon, obviously. It was just a typical cartoon, which, as in your introduction, was good because the next day it was just another cartoon. The next day another cartoon. Now we did end up having the National Cartoon Society did a whole presentation or a series of cartoons on Thanksgiving or right around Thanksgiving that all dealt with the 9/11, and then they were auctioned off, and they made, I think, over $50,000 for whatever the charity was at the time that we were doing it for. And those cartoons were specifically about 9/11 in ways, similar to what this event is in some ways, but this is 10 years later, and it's a difficult thing as cartoonists to go, okay, well, when you're going to read the newspaper or the comics page, do you really want to be bringing this all up? But I think that the cartoons have a variety of ways of looking at it. It's specific for each cartoon. In my cartoon, I could do it because it dealt with family, but you don't want to be heavy-handed about it.
Right.
You don't want a newspaper, the Sunday paper, to be, oh my gosh, not another cartoon. But what I'm looking forward to is seeing how each cartoonist who participated in it deals with it. Some will be more patriotic, and some will be more contemplative or whatever. But it's a whole variety because cartoonists represent a cross section of the United States, and they each deal with it in their own way. We have a business where you're really isolated from each other, and so I have no idea what other cartoonists have done, and I'm just as interested in seeing it as I think hopefully anybody else would be.
Well, and I was going to ask you about that. Do the cartoonists participating, and obviously there's nearly 100, did they have to submit this particular strip to anyone other than their usual editor? Was there anyone kind of coordinating all this?
Well, I only know what King Features was doing because that was they sent me a notice back in May. I think it was the end of May or whatever at that time. If you wanted to participate in this, it was something that at that time I don't work that far ahead into September, so it was like, well, yeah, I have no idea what I would do. And as I saw that day coming of when that would be due, I was like, well, what can I do? What can I do? And so I just did it. You just did it as normal, and I assumed that everybody else just sent it in and did it. I know that Brendan Burford, who's a comics editor at King Features, organized, I believe, the whole thing, and then dealt with other syndicates, Universal and Washington Post and creators, and into getting them all to participate as much as they cared to. It wasn't something you had to do. It was something if you felt like it would be appropriate, then you could do it.
Brendan, for people listening who don't know, the comics editor at King Features, has also been a guest on this show. Good guy.
Oh,
Um, oh,
was he any good?
he was okay, you know. Of course, that was before we were doing videos, so maybe he wouldn't hold
Oh,
up as well.
I should be grateful for that.
I'll let him know you said so. Oh, what am I saying? Here, we'll just send him the video. I'm thinking.
Take the mask on, then I'd have a lot more to say.
Yeah, yeah, because he wouldn't know.
That's right.
Excuse me. Now, it can't be easy to figure out an appropriate way, even within the context of Family Circus, to handle the 10th anniversary of this. Did you have some ideas that you kind of ran through before you settled on one, or did you know immediately what you wanted to do?
I actually did have several ideas, and I ran it by. Actually, I ran it by my brother, asking him what he. Here's a couple ideas. I didn't want to be heavy-handed. I wanted it to be appropriate for the characters. For one thing, the characters in Family Circus are young, so technically a 10-year anniversary of none of them would have even been born yet.
Good point.
And so it was one of those things. So I wanted to have it be something that it was appropriate for 9/11, but also appropriate for any other time of the year too. So you could read into it what you wanted to read into it. I wanted to be a little bit more subtle, because some of the ideas I had were a little bit more obvious, and I thought what ended up with I was really happy with.
And did you, in contemplating what would work best for you, did you take the concepts out, go through the backyard, go through the sandbox, go up the ladder, come down the slide, do the teeter-totter thing, back through the sandbox, and then come back in the house and settle on something? Is that how that worked?
I didn't go through the sandbox twice.
Oh, you don't? No. Okay. I kind of somehow always imagined through the sandbox twice.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I know we can't see the strip ahead of time, but can you tell us anything in general terms about, pardon me, about what you settled on?
Well, like I said, it's a cartoon that has to do. It has Jeff in it, and it's an evening time praying cartoon of praying for Mommy and Daddy and Billy and Dolly and Grandma and all of them, and being a little bit more restless at night, and then getting up and basically praying for the world, and then being more comfortable sleeping. And so now you don't have to see the cartoon.
Well, we'll check anyway. What was it like having young children at the time of the event 10 years ago? And what insights did you get from their response, or did you even tell? I know we held off on telling. My daughter would have been almost 5 at the time, and I know we didn't discuss it for probably a year. It never came up at school in her age group, and she wasn't really exposed to it. And then over time, I know that we would tell her things about it. We didn't rush to give her information, but as she kind of grew into it, we let her know. But because you and your wife were both traveling in a way, how was it handled in the Keane household?
We pretty much talked about it right away. When my son would have been, or our son would have been 8 or 9. And then our daughter would have been 6, and another daughter was 3. I know that immediately at school, it was a topic. They did those things, and it was something that I didn't feel that you couldn't talk about at the time. I think in their minds it was very distant,
Right.
and it's a hard concept. You're watching on TV. I don't think they could quite understand it as well as we could as adults, but it's interesting. I haven't talked to Spencer, our son, what he remembers of that time. That he's now a sophomore in college.
Wow.
So,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Well, and I was just thinking, as you were describing the situation in your house and talking about it, it's amazing to me in retrospect that we were able to actually keep that from her. I mean, we didn't go, we didn't hide newspapers or magazines. It just didn't come up to an almost 5-year-old. It wasn't part of her, her lexicon. She wasn't exposed to the news. And I compare that to now, where she knows everything that's going on. She knows way too much about what's going
There
on.
was no Facebook. There was no that. It was if you kids didn't watch TV, which our kids did, but they weren't watching any normal shows. They were just watching Mister Rogers and and some videos, Disney videos we'd put on or whatever. So it was talked about, but then just it was not talked about again. It wasn't something that was brought up every night.
Right.
And I know at school they talked about it, and that was it. And then they kind of moved on with their schooling and all that stuff. And I agree that nowadays it would be even more. I don't know, what age wouldn't be more aware of it so quickly.
Yeah, just just a couple of weeks ago, well, I guess a week or two ago, it was the first time my daughter came to me to announce breaking news. And I said, how did you even know? She said, oh, I saw it on the homepage on AOL. It was breaking news. And I said, this is going to go down in my memory because this is the first time you've come to tell me about something that I didn't already know about in the news. That was,
Yeah. Well, it is. We're all old.
It's true. So at least you've still got hair.
Supposedly.
Jeff, how did the Cartoonists Remember 9/11 event come about? Can you give us a little background on that?
Like it was from Brendan at King. As far as I know, it was something he sent out and asked if we'd wanted to participate, and it wasn't a requirement or anything. It was if it felt appropriate, which I can see how some cartoonists it'd be very difficult. You can't change from being this type of cartoon to this type of cartoon all of a sudden.
Right.
And that would make it very difficult. And over time, I believe they managed. Then they talked to the other syndicates, and all the other syndicates were obviously willing to take part in it also, which was great because you wanted to show that it's not just one syndicate focused at all. The cartoonists across the country are really looking at this.
Might be a little tough for Prince Valiant or Flash Gordon to work it into a storyline.
Yeah. However, you never know. They might just put a little tagline at the bottom or something.
True.
A remember or something like that. It doesn't necessarily the cartoons doesn't have to be about 9/11. As I said, I think it's sometimes it's a feeling as opposed to an obvious grab at patriotism or something like that.
Now, you haven't seen the other artists' work at the moment, so
No, I'm sure it's all better than mine. So.
oh, stop, jeez. What I wanted to know was whose work are you most looking forward to seeing? Who do you think will have a very interesting take?
Oh, you know what? I'm not gonna say anything because I'm just interested. I don't really know all of the whoever did it. I saw a list, but they'll all be fascinating to me. In some ways, I'll only see what my two newspapers I read have in them, and then I can go online. I know that they're going to post the cartoons on a site that day, and the original artwork is in various museums across the country. I know San Francisco Museum, I believe in Washington there's one. There's a couple in New York, and I think mine is at Museum of Cartoon Art in New York City.
MoCA, MOCCA. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I understand there's a website, Cartoonists Remember 9/11.com. People can go and check out the online gallery there. And
yeah, so that's where I'll be able to see all the ones that obviously I can't see because there's 100 or so doing it, which it'll be a very interesting event to see.
Definitely. Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I'd like to actually talk to you about Family Circus in particular. This is
that I might know about.
Okay. Well, good, because I would like to talk to you about something in which you have some expertise. That seems appropriate.
Clearly, I have no expertise.
All right.
Should I put the mask back on?
Maybe, maybe, or maybe you could put on a different mask when we come back. I like that. Um, this is Bob Andelman, and you're listening to and hopefully watching the Mr. Media interview with Jeff Keane, who creates the Family Circus daily comic strip that was actually created by his father Bill back in 1960. And we'll be right back. Hey folks, you can hear Mr. Media while on the go now with Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher is a free news and talk mobile app available for your smartphone, whether you use an iPhone, iPod Touch, Android, BlackBerry Curve, or Palm Pre. And when you download Stitcher to hear Mr. Media today, you have a chance to win some real money. Downloading is quick and easy. Just find Stitcher in your smartphone's app store. Download it, it's free, takes seconds. Then, during registration, hit the promo code box and enter Mr. Media, that's MR Media, to get automatically entered to win $100. The latest episode of Mr. Media will be waiting for you in Stitcher's favorites right on your phone. You'll get access to lots of other amazing shows too, always available to you on demand, no syncing. Some of my favorites include WTF with Mark Maron, Plus One Per Diem with Kevin Smith, and The Nerdist with Chris Hardwick. It's all free and all instant to you on Stitcher Smart Radio. And don't forget to win the money. Enter promo code Mr. Media, MR Media, when you register. And thanks for listening. This is Bob Andelman, and you're listening to and hopefully watching the Mr. Media interview with Jeff Keane, who creates the Family Circus daily comic strip created by his father, Bill, in 1960. So, Jeff, in this portion of the show, I want to focus on Family Circus and sort of the passing of the strip from one generation to the next. But first, I want to ask you, as the youngest of the Bill Keane clan, what's your earliest memory of your dad being a cartoonist?
Him insisting that I do something funny so that he could get another cartoon idea. No, my earliest memory is exactly what anybody's father. Him being around the house. I guess the difference was he didn't go off to work. He would just go outside and into his studio, which had a separate door. And then Dad was working. And we didn't really go in there, and we'd play in the yard, and you'd see him standing at the big window at his studio looking at us, and I realize now, he was working on ideas and trying to figure things out. What would make an appropriate gag or an appropriate cartoon for the coming weeks or whatever. And when we go on vacation, Dad would actually we'd have family vacations where we'd drive across the country in the car, and we'd stop at some hotel, and my mom would take the five of us kids to out to do some adventure, and Dad would stay in the hotel. And I didn't realize at the time that he would stay because he was working on the cartoons, and then as long as it was a mailbox, then he could send them off, and then we would still have our family vacation together, though, and then the evening time. And then the next day he'd be off. If it was a really nice place, then we'd all go. We'd go back again the next day with Dad.
Got it. And when did Jeff Keane realize he was Jeffy in a comic strip? How does that come over a kid's conscious?
I don't know, but it was. It wasn't great for in high school trying to get dates when Jeffy was wetting the bed or whatever it was. But I was always pretty aware of it because on our lunch bags, my mom would sometimes have to take a family trip. She'd go to Australia where she was born and visit her family. So then Dad had to take care of the house for the 4 weeks or 6 weeks that she was gone, which then we really liked because it was going to be a lot of food coming from outside the source rather than being actually cooked at home. But he would draw on my lunch bag and write my name and draw a little Jeffy on there and hand it. And so I'd have to go to school and be tortured by the other children.
Oh,
No, it was actually really nice. It was really nice.
Was there? Did your dad ever confuse you with the characters in the strip? Did he ever assign characteristics to you in person that were not necessarily there?
No, it's the other way around. I would decide. It was no. I mean, for me, Jeffy was me, so I didn't have that problem. Yeah, I guess you would call Chris Billy or Glenn Billy or Neil or Gail. My sister Gail was Dolly when she was a little girl. My mom would call her Dolly, so that was her. But she was the oldest in the family, so as opposed to the order in the feature.
And you mentioned about girls like in high school. How I mean, I would think that it would break very simply into two camps. There would be the group of girls who would just like shudder at the thought of going out with cartoon Jeffy, and then there'd be the other girls who would be like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah, well, the second group of girls were very few and far away. So most of them were shuddering.
Did that go any better in college?
Well, yeah. I mean, then once you get past being high school age, then everything becomes relative, and you kind of are doing your own thing.
Got it.
And I was really I was doing theater, so in some sense, that's just as weird.
Now, I before I ask you this next question, I want to make clear that your dad is still with us, and
yeah. Anyway, Dad's still in the house we grew up in Paradise Valley, Arizona. We moved there in 1959 when I was 9 months old from Pennsylvania to Arizona, and so I grew up in Arizona all those years. And Dad's still in the same house, the same. He goes out to the studio and he works on things, and that's where. So it's really nice that he's able to still be there.
Did any of your older siblings ever express any interest in following his footsteps, doing what he does?
Well, my brother Glenn is an animator at Disney.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, and so he certainly went in a different direction than my dad, but it was never something that was you had to do or didn't have to do as a family. It was whatever. My mom and dad just encouraged us to do something that we really liked, or as long as we were really happy with what we were doing, that was good. But as I said, I didn't pursue it. It was only after I graduated from college that I started to work with my dad to give myself a free schedule so I could audition and do all those type of things. And so I gradually did more and more of I put together books. I did these, and slowly the one thing drifted away, and this became what I was doing, and I really enjoyed it. I think I had a real connection to it all along, because it was us. It was me. It was my mom and dad. It was my brothers and sisters, my grandparents, and in some ways, I think the theater made the same thing to me. I put myself in the situation and go, well, what would they say here, or how would I say this, and also it gives me I get a lot of credit for doing things that really was my dad's creation.
And over time, let's say in the last decade or so, you've gotten more and more involved in what we see in the Daily Strip. Chris Brown told me a couple months ago in another interview that he had to audition in person for King Features before he got the job, following his dad, Dick Brown, on Hagar the Horrible. And
How did he get the? Did he?
I think it turned out okay. Yeah.
Oh, good.
I think it did. Now that was a different situation. His father had passed suddenly. Your dad, obviously, that's why I make the point, is still with us. But did you have to go through any of that, or did you just have to be vetted by your dad to step in and take a bigger role?
I just went to my mom and said she. No, it was just a gradual process. He would say, "Why don't you try doing this?" And I can't. How am I supposed to do this? Oh, all right, I'll try. And I would do it, and then he would work, and he would say, "Well, this is what." My dad was really good at being positive about the work you've done. Mm-hmm. It's something I'm not particularly good at. But he would just correct something, but do it in a way that, look, you just try it like this or that, and it was so. In some ways, I wasn't auditioning for it. Because it wasn't something I was trying to do. It was a gradual process where all of a sudden I'm doing more and more, and then when it became time to, he said, "Well, why don't you try inking some of the cartoons?" And I was like, "Oh, I can't ink this stuff." At the time, his inker was Bud Warner, who would draw these beautiful, complicated drawings with, and he uses a brush. And just the idea of using a brush would be difficult. But frankly, I didn't know how to ink anyway. So I might as well teach myself to use the brush as opposed to just using a pen. And slowly over time, it actually did work out. And so I still just use it. It's all done with a brush and not with a pen. Well, some lines are done with a pen, but. So that was the main thing, and I thought, well, I'll never be able to do this. But with my dad's encouragement, basically, we would look at it and go, "Yeah, that looks just as good." And I was like, "Oh, wow, thanks, Dad."
Well, so that explains a lot of the continuity and the look of the strip over the years.
Yes, because I was doing what I felt. I really wanted it to be as good as he had always had it be, mm-hmm. And so that's why it's gratifying now if someone says, "Oh, I really like the car. Oh, it looks beautiful," or whatever it is. And that just means everything to me.
I was just thinking of the what to me is the greatest example of a strip not having that continuity as it moved kind of from one artist to another, which was Sally Forth over the years. When they first, and I apologize that I can't remember the original creator's name, but as he passed the chores on to another team. There was this instant pushback because it was so different. They didn't make any effort to make it look like Sally Forth had looked, and it's had several looks over the years as they've kind of worked those things through. But so in this case, in Family Circus's case, you studied the brush technique essentially, and there's that continuity. So it doesn't look all that different today than it did. A generation ago, in many ways.
Well, if you look at it from 1960, it looks a lot different.
Well, yes, that's why I only went one generation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing as you see the cartoons grow. I mean, you can see the characters and how they developed and the artistry, and that's so common with almost every cartoon that I see. You see those early cartoons. The one thing that's always fascinating to me is usually that first cartoon or those first week's cartoon, you look at it and go, "Oh, that sums up the cartoon perfectly." Just the first Peanuts cartoon sums it up perfectly. And the Family Circus cartoon, the first cartoon my dad did with the lady coming to the door and mommy with a bunch of toys around and the lady being a survey saying, "So any children?" Was sort of, it was a summation of the cartoon in essence. And you immediately knew what it was. And I find that to be true with so many of the great cartoons that have come out.
I loved Brian Walker's recent book on Doonesbury. It was G.B. Trudeau and the Art of Doonesbury. And it was, he kind of detailed how Trudeau evolved the art there. I mean, Trudeau was not an artist when he started doing the strip, but through focus and desire, he became an artist. I mean, there was. Yeah,
I really like that book too. In fact, Gary and several other cartoons, we went to Afghanistan together, and while we were there, Gary was working on his cartoon, and he's penciling, and was just going, "Oh my gosh, this is so great to see him penciling, and it looked just absolutely beautiful." And just getting to see that beginning stage and seeing it creative is just a It's an amazing thing.
Now, I want to go back for a second. You were saying earlier about how your dad would kind of look out the window at you kids doing what you're doing in the backyard, and he basically doing research for his gags. And this is the oldest question in the book, but where do you get your ideas for gags in the strip? And I want to point out to folks who haven't done the math, it's 2011. This is the 51st year that this strip has been produced. I don't even want to do the math for how many strips there are in existence. So how do you keep it fresh, other than you have the benefit of the internet that your dad didn't 50 years ago?
I just reverse it. I try to remember what I was doing when my dad was standing there at the window, and then I'm able to create. No, it's I had three kids, and actually when they were growing up, I've got a little book of gags that I would write up, and this might be a good idea, and I'll go back and you go back and you look at those, and I don't know that I've used many of those specific gags, but from that you'll become an offshoot of something else, or you'll look back at past cartoons and realize, I know how I can change that and make that into current day. The feelings that families have, and the feelings they have for each other, and the way kids deal with each other when I was a kid and when you were a kid, and when kids is the same. It's just the environment around them really changes. The computers and as we were saying, the internet age of being able to the instant access and those things. But when it's 7, 5, 3, 18 months old, it's you just I kind of have, I guess I use my my acting and try and figure, okay, what would be an appropriate thing to say. Now sometimes of course they're saying things that are questionable for a 7-year-old, 4-year-old, but hey, it's just a cartoon.
Right. And I just like to point out that when I was that age, my parents called me Mr. Media even then. I just in case.
Like you are.
Yeah, just right. I mean, just in case anyone was wondering.
It's that thing on your head.
Yeah. I actually require my wife to call me that as well, but I guess we probably should save that for another time. What's the best advice your dad gave you about maintaining the Family Circus family business?
Do exactly as he would do. No, he didn't give it any specific. I think it really, as long as it's true, as long as you feel that this is something that has a possibility of happening, or you maintain the right feel, it's going to be correct. And if you're happy with it, then most likely other people will be happy with it also.
Well, I've just got one last thing to ask you about, a little unrelated, but maybe not so much. But Stephan Pastis, who draws Pearls Before Swine.
Yes, I'm familiar with him.
I know. He loves to take shots at Family Circus in his strip.
I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah. I'll give you a freebie here. Anything you'd like to tell our viewers or listeners about Stephan that maybe they wouldn't know otherwise?
No, well, I have to keep this G-rated, so I can't say anything. Stephan, I like Stephan. I always enjoy reading it. He does a great job, and Stephan and I, unfortunately, are friends. And he'll continue to stand on Family Circus shoulders just to be successful.
Good line. Very well done. All right. Well, listen, folks, you can see the results of the Cartoonists Remember 9/11 event in your Sunday newspaper this weekend, September 11th, or you can visit cartoonistRemember911.com for a gallery slideshow of all the art that's produced, as well as you'll see dates and locations for where you can actually see the art in person in galleries around the country. And don't miss Family Circus in your local newspaper. 7 days a week, going on now 51 years. It's amazing. You can also learn more about the creation of Bill Keane and the current work of Jeff Keane, at FamilyCircus.com. And Jeff, a lot of fun to talk to you. I'm glad we finally got you on the show, and thanks so much for joining us in Mr. Media today.
No, it was great. I really appreciate it. I guess I'll see you in the funny papers, right?
That you will. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.